Sometimes, a single act of kindness can strike a chord that changes lives forever. The restaurant smelled of coffee and fresh bread, the kind of scent that made customers smile when they walked in. But for her, it was just another reminder of long hours ahead. She tied her apron tightly, smoothed her hair back, and tried to put on the same polite smile she wore every day. Behind that smile, however, there was exhaustion. She was a young mother, but life had already taught her hard lessons. She was raising her son on her own, and every paycheck she earned seemed to vanish as quickly as it came. Bills stacked up on the kitchen counter, and sometimes she had to choose between paying rent or buying something her son truly needed. Her son was the center of her world. He had been born with a condition that made it hard for him to walk, and he often relied on a wheelchair. Despite his struggles, he had a spirit that lifted her up. He laughed easily, loved stories, and had a fascination with music. Whenever the sound of drums filled the room, his face would glow in a way that words could never describe. He would tap his fingers against the table, trying to copy the rhythm, his whole body swaying as if the beat was running through his veins. She saw this joy and dreamed of one day giving him real lessons, maybe even buying him a drum set. But that was a dream she kept locked in her heart, because reality was much harsher. The restaurant where she worked was not an easy place. Most of the customers were wealthy, and many treated her like she was invisible. They came in wearing designer clothes, talking loudly about vacations, expensive cars, business deals she couldn't even imagine. She would smile, write down their complicated orders, and rush off to bring them their meals. Often, she would overhear remarks about her appearance or the way she spoke, and though the words stung, she swallowed them quietly. She couldn't afford to lose her job. Some nights, when she returned home, she would find her son waiting at the door, his eyes lighting up just because she had finally come back. He would ask about her day, and she would tell him stories that made her job sound lighter than it really was. She didn't want him to worry, even though he could see her tired eyes. He would sometimes say, "One day, Mom, I'll play the drums on a big stage and buy you a house so you never have to work again." She would laugh, hug him tightly, and whisper that his dream was enough to keep her going. Money was always the main struggle. The rent took a big chunk of her paycheck, and medical expenses for her son added another heavy weight. She worked double shifts whenever she could, sometimes staying on her feet for 14 hours straight. Her legs ached, her hands were cracked from washing dishes, and there were nights when she skipped dinner so her son could have a full plate. She never complained. Her only prayer was to keep her son happy and to give him a chance at a future brighter than hers. The little boy didn't complain either. Though he sometimes felt left out when other children ran and played freely, he found his own kind of joy in small things. He loved listening to music videos on her old phone, especially ones with drummers. He would close his eyes, tap along with the beat, and pretend the world was cheering for him. His laughter echoed through their small apartment, turning it into something warmer than its cracked walls and broken furniture. One afternoon, after finishing a tiring morning shift, she took her son for a walk near the park. There was a street performer playing a drum set, and the boy's eyes widened in wonder. He begged to stay, and she agreed, sitting with him on a bench. For nearly an hour, he was lost in the music, clapping his hands, moving his body, and smiling like he had no worries in the world. She watched him with tears in her eyes, both happy and sad. Happy that he found joy in music, but sad because she couldn't give him more than this moment. She often wondered how life could be so unfair. Why did some people have more than they could ever use, while she struggled just to provide the basics? She had seen customers at the restaurant leave tips that were more than her weekly rent, yet she still counted coins before paying for groceries. But even in those moments of frustration, she never lost hope. She believed kindness mattered, and she believed her son's dreams were worth holding on to. The boy's disability had also made her stronger. There were times when doctors told her to lower her expectations, to prepare for limits, but she refused to see him as limited. He was her miracle, her reason to keep moving forward. Whenever he struggled, she encouraged him, reminding him that his heart was stronger than any obstacle. He believed her, and his courage inspired her to push through her exhaustion, no matter how hard things became. At the restaurant, She sometimes caught the eyes of a few regular customers who seemed to notice her son when he came in briefly to see her. Most people ignored him, but there were rare moments when she saw compassion. Those moments reminded her that the world wasn't always cold. Still, she never expected miracles. Her plan was simple: work as much as she could, save every penny, and pray that one day she could buy her son the drumsticks he always dreamed about. Each night, after putting her son to bed, she sat by the window with a cup of tea, staring at the city lights. She thought about the life she wanted for him. One where he could chase his love for music without worrying about money or his wheelchair. She whispered promises to herself that no matter how long it took, she would find a way. Those quiet nights were filled with both fear and determination. But her love for her son was stronger than any doubt. Her life may have looked small from the outside, just a waitress living paycheck to paycheck. But inside that little apartment was a story of endless courage, a boy with a rhythm in his heart, and a mother who believed that even the smallest act of kindness could change everything. Neither of them knew it yet, but their lives were on the edge of something unexpected. Something that would begin with a simple drum set and a moment that would capture the attention of someone who had the power to change everything. The billionaire was a man who had everything people usually dreamed about. He owned companies, cars, and houses that looked more like palaces than homes. When he walked into a room, people respected him, not just because of his money, but also because of the way he carried himself. He had power, influence, and endless opportunities. Yet behind all that shine was a shadow no one else could see. At home, he was just a father who felt powerless. His only son had once been full of energy and laughter. The boy used to run through the halls of their mansion, play soccer in the garden, and light up the house with his jokes. But everything changed after a terrible accident. In one night, joy turned into silence. The boy was left in a wheelchair, and though he could still speak and think clearly, his spirit was broken. He no longer laughed, no longer cared for the things he once loved. He withdrew into himself, shutting out the world, including his own father. The billionaire tried everything money could buy. He hired the best doctors, paid for therapy sessions, even brought in private tutors and entertainment to distract his son. But nothing worked. The boy remained distant, answering in short words, refusing to look him in the eye. It was as if a wall had been built between them, one the father couldn't break, no matter how much he spent. He often walked through his giant house at night, wondering how he could control empires yet failed to reach his own child. Their relationship grew colder over time. The father would take him to expensive places, concerts, sports events, luxury resorts, but the boy showed no interest. He sat quietly, staring at the floor or gazing out windows. The father's heart broke each time, but he didn't know how to show it. He was a man used to solving problems with deals and contracts, not with emotions. So he remained silent, keeping his feelings locked inside, while his son drifted further away. One of the few places they visited together was the restaurant where the waitress worked. It was elegant but cozy, a place where the father could eat without the constant flash of cameras or the stares of the public. He often brought his son there, hoping the change of scenery would do some good. But even there, the boy's expressions stayed empty. He would sit quietly, barely touching his food, lost in thoughts his father could never reach. The billionaire noticed the waitress sometimes. She had a kind face and treated every customer with the same patience, whether rich or ordinary. Unlike other staff who fussed over him because of his status, she simply did her job with a quiet dignity. He respected that. He also noticed the way her eyes softened when she looked at children, especially her own son, who occasionally came in. He admired her strength, though he never said a word. For him, speaking openly was hard, especially when it came to personal matters at night. When the world believed he was living a perfect life, the billionaire sat alone in his study, staring at old photographs of his son before the accident. The laughter captured in those pictures haunted him. He missed that boy. He missed the sound of his footsteps running through the halls. He would give away half his fortune just to see his son smile again. Yet no matter what he did, money couldn't fix this. That truth weighed heavier on him than all his business responsibilities combined. The boy's silence was not just sadness, it was anger too. He sometimes felt his father only cared about wealth, that he was more comfortable in boardrooms than in their home. Though the father tried to bridge the gap, he often failed. He spoke like a businessman, offering solutions when his son only wanted understanding. The more he tried, the more the boy pulled away. Their conversations were rare and short, filled with unspoken pain. Still, the billionaire never gave up hope. Every time he looked at his son, he told himself there had to be a way to reach him. He believed there was still light buried beneath the boy's sadness. He just didn't know how to uncover it. He prayed quietly, though he wasn't a religious man. He asked for one chance, one small miracle, something that could break through the silence and bring his son back to life. On one particular evening, when they went again to the restaurant, the father sat across from his son, watching him stir his drink without lifting it to his lips. The father wanted to speak, to say something meaningful, but the words never came. He noticed the waitress passing by, greeting customers warmly, and for a moment, he envied her ability to connect with people so easily. If only he could do the same with his own child. The father's wealth gave him many things: respect, power, influence, but it never gave him peace. His son was the only thing he couldn't fix with a signature on a check. And though he didn't realize it yet, that quiet evening in the restaurant was the beginning of a change he had longed for but never expected. A change that would not come from money or luxury, but from kindness and music to things he had overlooked in his desperate search for answers. For now, though he sat in silence, watching his son's tired eyes and wondering if he would ever hear his laughter again, deep inside he knew the answer was close, but it would come from a place he least expected and from a person he hardly knew. The restaurant was busy that night, filled with the sound of plates clinking, laughter rising from the tables, and soft jazz music drifting through the air. A small band had been invited to play, and their rhythm brought a warm energy to the room. People tapped their feet. Some nodded their heads to the beat, and for a moment, even the tired waitress felt lighter as she rushed from table to table. She noticed the drums most of all. Their steady beat seemed to pull at her heart, reminding her of the way her own son's eyes lit up whenever he heard that sound. At one corner table, the billionaire sat with his son. The father was dressed in his usual expensive suit, his expression calm but tired, while his son looked down, uninterested, slowly moving the food around his plate. The father tried to encourage him to eat, but the boy shook his head slightly and went back to staring at the table. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes dull. He didn't seem to notice the lively music around him at all. But then, for the first time in a long while, something caught his attention. The drummer of the band struck a sharp rhythm, and the boy's head lifted. His eyes moved toward the stage where the shining drum set stood. His fingers twitched slightly against the armrest of his wheelchair, almost as if he wanted to copy the beat. The waitress, who had just walked past, noticed this tiny change. It was so small that no one else would have seen it, but she did. She paused, her heart beating faster because she recognized that look. It was the same look her own son had whenever he heard drums. She hesitated for a moment, unsure if she should step forward. After all, this was not her place. And the man sitting with the boy was someone powerful, someone she knew was used to people being careful around him. But then she looked again at the boy's face. He seemed torn between longing and fear, like he wanted to reach out but didn't dare. Something inside her pushed her forward. Kneeling down beside the boy, she smiled gently and asked, "Do you like the drums?" Her voice was soft, warm, and filled with kindness. The boy looked at her in surprise. No one had asked him that in a long time. Slowly, he gave the smallest nod. The waitress's smile grew. "Would you like to try them?" she whispered, as if sharing a secret. The boy's eyes widened, and for a moment, he almost looked frightened. He shook his head quickly at first, then glanced toward the drums again. His father, watching this, sat very still. He didn't say anything, unsure of what was happening, but his heart tightened. He hadn't seen his son react to anything in months. The waitress didn't pressure him. Instead, she said, "I can help you. Just a few taps. No one will judge you here." Her tone was so encouraging that the boy slowly raised his hand, uncertain. Seeing this small gesture, she carefully guided his wheelchair toward the stage. The band members looked surprised, but when she explained with a nod and a smile, it gladly made space. The boy's hands trembled as she placed a drumstick in his palm. He stared at it as though it was something magical. The waitress helped him position his hand, her movements gentle and patient. The boy lifted his eyes to the shining drums in front of him, and for the first time in so long, there was a flicker of excitement. His first strike was clumsy. The stick hit the drum weakly, producing a dull sound. A few people in the restaurant turned their heads, curious. The boy froze, embarrassed, and looked like he wanted to pull away. But the waitress quickly whispered, "That was perfect. Try again." Her words gave him courage. He tapped once more, then again. Slowly, a rhythm began to form. The restaurant grew quieter. Conversations hushed as people noticed the boy at the drum set. The soft tapping turned stronger, more confident. The boy's body leaned forward slightly, his face concentrating. His arms, once still and lifeless, began to move with purpose. He struck the drums again, and the beat echoed through the room. Then something extraordinary happened. His rhythm grew smoother, and his lips curved into a smile, real smile, bright and full of life. The waitress felt her chest tighten with emotion. She looked at the father, and her eyes widened at what she saw. The billionaire, usually so composed, was frozen in his chair, his mouth slightly open, his eyes glassy with unshed tears. He hadn't seen his son smile like that in years. The boy lost himself in the music. Each beat seemed to shake the sadness off his shoulders. He struck harder, faster, his rhythm aligning with the band's bass. The drummer beside him joined in, encouraging him, and soon the two of them were creating a beat together. The boy laughed suddenly, the sound breaking the silence that had surrounded him for so long. The whole restaurant erupted into soft applause, not loud or mocking, but warm and supportive. The billionaire's heart ached in the most beautiful way. He wanted to capture this moment forever. His son, the boy he thought he had lost to sadness, was alive again right in front of him. And it wasn't doctors, money, or luxury that made it happen. It was the kindness of a waitress who believed in a moment, who saw something everyone else had ignored. When the boy finally stopped, breathing hard but glowing with joy, the waitress gently took the drumstick from his hand and placed it on the stand. The restaurant filled with clapping, and the boy blushed, looking down shyly, but still smiling. His father stood up, unable to sit any longer, and placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Their eyes met, and for the first time since the accident, there was connection. It was small, fragile, but it was there. The billionaire turned his gaze to the waitress, his throat tight. She only smiled at him, as if to say, it wasn't MIT was always him. He just needed a chance. She didn't want recognition. She only wanted the boy to feel joy, if even for a moment. The night continued, but nothing felt the same. The boy sat straighter in his chair, humming along with the music, still tapping his fingers on the table, even after leaving the drums. The father, still shaken, couldn't stop watching him. He had just witnessed something he thought he'd never see again: his son, coming back to life through the beat of a drum. No one in that restaurant forgot that moment. For the father, it was the beginning of hope. For the boy, it was the return of joy. And for the waitress, it was proof that sometimes the smallest gesture can open the door to something extraordinary. After the music faded and the room returned to its normal noise, the billionaire still sat in silence, his eyes fixed on his son. He couldn't stop replaying the scene in his mind, his boy smiling, his hands moving with rhythm, the sound of laughter filling the air. That smile was worth more than every fortune he owned, yet he knew it wasn't him who had brought it back. It was the waitress, the woman who had seen something no one else noticed. He stood up and walked toward her. She was back at work, carrying plates and refilling glasses, as though nothing extraordinary had just happened. Her hair was slightly messy from the rush, and her hands were red from hot dishes, but she moved with quiet determination. When he reached her, she looked up, surprised to see him standing there. He cleared his throat, trying to steady his voice, but it still carried emotion. "Thank you," he said softly, almost awkwardly. "You don't know what you've done tonight?" The waitress gave him a small smile, her eyes gentle. He did it himself. "I just gave him the chance." He wanted to say more, but words failed him. For a man used to commanding boardrooms and delivering speeches, this was unusual. All he could do was nod. When she turned back to her work, he remained standing there for a moment, feeling something he hadn't felt in years, gratitude so deep it almost hurt. Later that evening, after finishing their meal, he approached her again, this time pulling out a card from his wallet. "I want to do something for you," he said firmly. "Anything. Just name it." He was ready to give her money, connections, even a better job if she wanted it. He felt he owed her more than he could ever repay. But the waitress shook her head. "I don't need anything," she replied kindly. "I just wanted him to feel happy. That's all." Her refusal stunned him. He was a man who solved problems by giving people things, bonuses, gifts, opportunities. But here was a woman who didn't want any of that. She wasn't pretending. He could see it in her eyes. She was sincere. She wasn't after his wealth, and that realization touched him more than he expected. Over the next few weeks, he found himself returning to the restaurant more often with his son. At first, he told himself it was because his boy seemed happier there. But deep down, he knew it was also because of her. The waitress treated his son like a person, not a patient, not a burden, not a billionaire's child. She asked him small questions, encouraged him to try little things, and listened when he spoke in his quiet voice. Slowly, the boy began opening up. He even started smiling more, tapping his fingers on the table in rhythm whenever the band played. The billionaire watched all of this carefully. Each time, his heart swelled with hope, but he also felt a strange ache. Why had it taken a stranger to see what he had missed for so long? He realized that in his desperation to fix his son with money, he had overlooked the simple truth. His boy needed connection, encouragement, and someone to believe in him. One night, after the restaurant closed, the billionaire lingered behind. He approached the waitress once more, his voice quieter this time. "How do you do it?" he asked. "How do you reach him so easily?" She looked at him thoughtfully. "I don't do anything special," she said. "I just listen. I don't see what he can't do. I see what he can." Those words stayed with him long after he left. For years, he had been focusing on his son's limitations, trying to heal what was broken. But she was right. What the boy needed was someone who believed in what was still possible. The waitress, meanwhile, felt a mix of emotions. She was glad she had helped the boy, but she also felt cautious. She had seen wealthy people before, and most of them treated kindness like a transaction. She didn't want anything from him. She had her pride, and she didn't want charity. What she wanted most was to keep giving her son the love and dignity he deserved. Even if life was hard, yet she couldn't ignore the way the billionaire looked at his son now. There was a softness in his eyes, a vulnerability he had never shown before. She realized he wasn't just a rich man. He was a father carrying deep pain, and for the first time in years, he was allowing himself to hope. As weeks turned into months, something subtle shifted. The billionaire's visits grew less about business dinners and more about quiet evenings with his son. He would sit back and watch the boy interact with the waitress, sometimes even laughing at her gentle jokes. Slowly, their relationship began to heal. The boy started talking to his father again, not much, but enough to break the silence that had once hung heavy between them. The billionaire felt a sense of gratitude he didn't know how to express. He wanted to repay the waitress, but every time he tried, she refused. "You don't owe me anything," she said. "Just be there for him. That's all that matters." Still, he couldn't stop thinking about her struggles. He had noticed the tired lines under her eyes, the way she sometimes winced when she thought no one was looking, the careful way she stretched every dollar. He knew she was working not for herself, but for her child. And though she never complained, he saw the weight she carried every single day. The dilemma grew inside him. He wanted to help her, but he also didn't want to insult her pride. He admired her strength too much for that. She wasn't like the people in his world who reached for his money at every chance. She was different. She was the kind of person who gave without expecting anything in return. One evening, as he watched his son clap along with the band, the billionaire realized something. Perhaps the greatest way to thank her was not through money, but through opportunity. If he could create a path for her son just as she had done for his, then it wouldn't be charity. It would be a chance The same kind of chance she had given his boy when she pushed him toward the drums. He didn't know how to tell her yet. But in his heart, a plan was forming. A plan that would change her life, not by erasing her struggles overnight, but by giving her child the future she had always dreamed of. For now, though, he said nothing. He simply sat with his son, watching him laugh and tap to the music, his heart lighter than it had been in years. And across the room, the waitress carried on with her work, unaware that her simple act of kindness had already set in motion something that would soon transform her world forever. Weeks passed, but the memory of that night with the drums stayed alive in everyone's mind. The boy's laughter had returned, and with it, a spark in his eyes that had been missing for years. His father, the billionaire, could hardly believe the change. He watched his son at home, tapping his fingers on tables, humming tunes, even attempting small rhythms on a borrowed practice pad. Every beat was a reminder of the moment that had started it all, and of the waitress who had quietly given his son a chance to shine. The billionaire knew he wanted to do more than just watch. He wanted to repay her, not out of obligation, but because he had seen the extraordinary love and care she poured into her son's life every single day. He began carefully considering ways to help, ways that would respect her pride and her dignity. He didn't want to hand her money or gifts that felt like charity. Instead, he wanted to create opportunities, real chances for her child to grow, learn, and thrive. One evening, he visited the restaurant after closing hours. The waitress was cleaning tables, humming softly, still unaware of the decision he had made. He approached her gently, his hands slightly trembling, an unusual display of vulnerability for a man so used to control and authority. "I want to help your son," he said quietly. "Not because you asked, not because you need money, but because I want to see him reach his dreams." She paused, wiping her hands on a towel, and looked at him with cautious curiosity. "I don't want charity," she said softly, her voice steady. "We can manage. We've always managed." He shook his head, smiling faintly. "This isn't charity. I want him to have music lessons, proper instruments, and therapy if he needs it. I want to give him what he deserves. You've given him hope, and now it's my turn to support him." For the first time in weeks, the waitress felt a tear slip down her cheek. She had never expected anyone to understand how much she wanted her son to have more than just fleeting moments of joy. She had dreamed of this quietly, but never dared to believe it could happen. And yet here was a man offering something extraordinary. It's not out of pity, but out of genuine respect and gratitude. The billionaire smiled at her reaction, sensing both relief and pride. He explained that he had arranged for her son to attend music lessons with professional instructors who specialized in children with physical challenges. He had also secured a state-of-the-art drum set, custom-fitted for her son's needs, along with therapy sessions that would strengthen his coordination and confidence. Everything had been arranged to ensure her child could grow his talent safely and joyfully. The waitress could hardly believe her ears. She wanted to say yes immediately, but she hesitated, thinking about her pride and the reality of their lives. "Are you sure about this?" she finally asked. "I don't want anyone feeling like they need to control him or me." The billionaire's gaze softened. "I'm sure. You've been in his life every day, guiding him with love. This is just giving him resources and chances that you couldn't provide alone. I'm not taking anything from you. I'm just helping him reach his potential." With a deep breath, she nodded. The mixture of relief, hope, and gratitude filled her chest so strongly that she had to steady herself. For years, she had worked tirelessly, sacrificing sleep, food, and comfort, all for her son. Now, someone else was joining her in that mission, not to replace her, but to strengthen her efforts. The following weeks were a whirlwind of change. Her son began taking professional lessons, and the growth was immediate. The boy who had once only tapped fingers on tabletops now played simple rhythms confidently, his coordination improving with every session. The drum set became his sanctuary, a place where he could explore, create, and express himself freely. And each time he struck the drums, he smiled. Remembering the first night when the kind waitress had encouraged him to try, the billionaire visited often. Not as a man of wealth, but as a father reconnecting with his child. He watched the boy grow, cheered on every small victory, and sometimes simply sat quietly, marveling at the transformation. His son, inspired by the support and encouragement, started opening up more, laughing, talking, and even sharing his music with the world in small ways. The bond between the waitress and the billionaire also strengthened. Though it was subtle and respectful, there was mutual admiration and understanding. She recognized his dedication as a father, while he admired her selflessness and courage. Neither of them sought friendship for its own sake. They were connected by something deeper: the care of two children whose lives had intersected in the most unexpected way. As months passed, the boy became more confident. He performed in small community events, sometimes alongside professional musicians, and his talent began drawing attention. His mother watched with pride, tears often filling her eyes, knowing that every sleepless night, every sacrifice had led to this moment. The boy was not just happy, he was thriving. The billionaire's son also experienced a change. Seeing the joy and growth of another child inspired him. Slowly, he began participating more in his own therapy sessions, finding new ways to engage with music and movement. He and the waitress's son sometimes played together, and their laughter echoed through the lessons and practice sessions. The walls that had once separated the billionaire's family slowly crumbled, replaced by hope, music, and connection. For the waitress, life had shifted in ways she never imagined. She still worked hard, still managed her household with care and dedication. But now there was hope, resources, and opportunities supporting her every step. She no longer worried about whether her son would have a chance to explore his passion. She could focus on nurturing his spirit rather than struggling with survival. The billionaire, too, learned a lesson that wealth had never taught him: that true change comes not from money alone, but from connection, empathy, and courage. He had spent years trying to fix problems with wealth, but it was the kindness of a simple waitress that had ignited transformation in both his son and the other boy. Her courage to act, her belief in possibility, created ripples that extended far beyond what anyone could measure. In the end, everyone's lives were forever changed. The waitress's son grew in confidence, skill, and happiness, and the waitress herself discovered that help could come from unexpected places without diminishing her dignity or love. The billionaire's family began to heal, finding joy and connection in places they had long forgotten. And in the background of all these changes, the restaurant remained a place of simple magic, the place where kindness, courage, and music had come together to create a life-changing moment. It was a reminder that sometimes the smallest gestures can spark the biggest transformations. A simple act of encouragement, a moment of trust, and a willingness to believe in someone's potential can ripple outward, touching lives in ways no one could have predicted. And for the waitress, the billionaire, and both children, that night with the drums became the beginning of a future full of hope, laughter, and endless possibility.